What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode. You know what today is? Today's the day. We're getting this thing started. So I have all the new fluids that are going to be going into the engine bay. We're going to be putting new engine oil in, the break-in engine oil. We're going to be putting new coolant in. We need to bleed the clutch because we put a new clutch line and slave cylinder on the transmission. And we have a couple other things that we need to address before we can turn this thing on. So it's currently on a trickle charger right now, and it's charging the battery. This thing hasn't been turned on in over 2 years. So I'm expecting the battery to be completely dead. I measured it with a voltmeter, wasn't exactly healthy. It was 12 volts on the money. So it's probably flat completely and I'll probably need to replace it, but I wanna see if I can at least hook the trickle charger up to it and have it start up. I'll probably even keep it on the car while I'm going ahead to actually crank the engine over. This way, I know for a fact that I'm going to have the power that I need to turn the engine. Alrighty, so if you guys have been staying up to date with my videos, I've been basically struggling with like little last minute small stuff for the mini motor. So see how I finally have the intake hooked up? This here is not going to be a permanent solution, but I have my DDM Works intake that hooks up to my hood. So I have fresh air coming in there. So that goes into my filter, past the sensor, past this 90-degree bend, through this aluminum pipe, and through this JMT silicone hose. Now, I'm not necessarily gonna be running it like this. I wanna eventually run a catch can because I have the PVC going from my valve cover to this piece here, and honestly, it's pretty jank. Now, I'm gonna be switching that up. I'll be probably getting something custom made because there's not really much that works with this size upgraded turbocharger. So because the inlet is larger, I had to replace this piece. Now, next up, I had to change out the charge pipe. So the piece that goes from the turbo to my intercooler. The Samco one that I had didn't exactly work. Now, I don't know why. I tried clocking the turbo to like rotate it a little bit more up or down to see if that would do anything, but that didn't get me anywhere. The next situation that I need to figure out is the issue with my expansion tank. So because this pipe here going to the turbocharger is larger, it's taking up more space, which means you can see right there that it's actually touching the housing. So that means that the intake air is going to be increased because it's touching this hot expansion tank. So this is essentially just gonna run. I'll be able to get this working for now, but I will be changing this out for something else. Now, I also need to find out a place to run my oil catch can. Now, I'm thinking maybe here, but I need something smaller than the one that I have. Now, I've seen most people run the oil catch cans up here in the corner, but I need to figure something else out. But in the meantime, we're gonna be pumping all the new fluids into this mini motor to get this thing turned on. So when it comes to filling and bleeding the cooling system, you wanna fill the reservoir as much as you can, and then afterwards, you wanna go over here on top of the cylinder head and right down in that little hole. See like that little Phillips head? That is a bleed port that's found on the top part of the thermostat housing. So when you bleed that, what's gonna happen is all the coolant that's in here will drain down and it will be able to fill up the entire rad, the engine, and the other cooling system that's found in the inside of the car, so the heater core. But we need to turn the vehicle on and cycle the heater core on to get it fully bled. When it comes to the initial install and startup of the engine, I'm not really going to be focusing on making sure that the heater core is bled. That's the least of my concerns. I want to make sure that the engine is running and spinning and everything's all working properly. So the cooling system isn't necessary for the initial start, but it is crucial to keeping it at that proper optimal operating temperature. So if I plan on having the engine running for a while, I definitely want to have that coolant in there. So I'm going to fill it up as much as I can now, and I'll re-bleed it later once I turn the engine on. So with the coolant level staying consistent, you can then go ahead and put the cap back on, and then the cooling system will be essentially pre-bled. So next up, I'm gonna address the brakes and the clutch system. So both of them run off the exact same reservoir. Now, because I installed a new clutch line along with a new slave cylinder, I need to bleed the clutch line. Now at this point, I can go ahead and take out all the old fluid and pump new fluid in. Now that new fluid is going to be touching the clutch and the brakes, each one of the 4 calipers on the car. So I'm gonna be using this Capri, whatever company it is, vacuum bleeder to get that done. I'm gonna siphon all of that fluid from the reservoir and then put new fluid in. With the master now full of fresh fluid, what we're gonna do is go underneath the car and bleed the nipple right here that's attached to the slave cylinder on the transmission. I'm going to be using the same Capri tool right here to do exactly that. I'm gonna put this on the nipple, crack the bleeder loose, and then it's gonna be able to suck all new fluid into that line. Now, just to double check, I'm gonna go in the car, press the clutch pedal a couple times to make sure that everything feels normal, and then that clutch system is gonna be properly bled. Okay, guys, so I have good news and bad news. Good news is the clutch is bled. Bad news is I think it's bled. So it's been such a long time since I've actually driven this car that I don't remember what the clutch feels like. Now, when you put your foot down to the extent or the bottom of the stroke, it feels like, it sounds like a a blow-off valve or wastegate or whatever opening up. So fingers crossed, like there's only fluid coming out, so everything should work as it should. So if it doesn't, I'll, change it or figure out what the actual issue is. But next up comes the engine oil. So that break-in fluid that we purchased that was crucial for the break-in procedure is what I'm now gonna be putting in the car. So see this stuff here? This is from Driven. Now this is a conventional engine oil. Now the reason why it's not synthetic is because synthetic is actually too good at lubricating the engine. Now what you're essentially trying to do with the break-in procedure is you wanna make it so that you actually have wear. So you want the combustion chamber and the pistons and the bearings and all that stuff to break in and seat themselves. If you don't go ahead and properly use that fluid, what you're gonna have is an engine that isn't gonna be making proper combustion. You're gonna have some leaks. You might get some oil leaks. So you definitely should not be running synthetic engine oil. After you break in the motor and then you do a cylinder leak down test, you can then go ahead and use not this stuff. You're gonna use your regular synthetic stuff. So I'm gonna be doing 2 oil changes, very short intervals with this. I'll go over that later, but this is what I'm gonna be putting in there right now. It's a Driven racing oil. Conventional 5W30. So the same weight and viscosity as my stock stuff, but not synthetic. You could probably get away with running a conventional engine oil, like a 530, just for the break-in procedure. But the thing is, this has high zinc. This engine oil right here is specifically designed so that when you're breaking in your engine, everything is lubricated as it should, everything gets to where it needs to be, and it breaks in properly. You can risk it and not use this stuff, or you can just use this and spend the extra money and make sure that have some sort of peace of mind. So I'm gonna put this in 5 quarts, or almost 5 quarts goes inside the mini motor, and I'm gonna do exactly that. So as I'm doing this, I'm gonna be talking to you guys about the engine break-in procedure. So the procedure that we're going to be doing is essentially 2 very short oil changes. Now you need to drive the engine in a certain manner so that everything breaks in as it should. Now I was talking to the guy that was gonna be tuning my engine, and he gave me basically a whole bunch of different things that I should look over and do so that I can ensure that my engine is broken in as it should. So see how I'm just pouring in regular engine oil from the top? Well, he said that if you can, try and run the engine oil through one of the galleries inside the engine itself and try and force it in there. For the regular Joe Schmo that's working on cars, you're probably not going to be able to get by because you don't have that tool. But if you want to build like a race engine, that is how they would come from the factory. I'm going to be doing a first engine oil break-in procedure where the first interval is only 500 kilometers. That's it. So after that first 500 kilometer break-in, you're gonna then do an oil change, inspect the fluid, inspect the filter, make sure that everything is in expected condition. You'll probably find some metal particulates inside the filter along with in the oil. There's some things that you do need to be careful for. So if you can see a little bit of gold or bronze material inside the oil filter, that means that the bearings themselves, the aftermarket King bearings that I have in here, those are wearing. So they're typically a harder bearing than the OEM ones, but we'll dig into that when time comes to it. What I'm gonna be doing for the first startup is actually something a little bit different. So whenever you turn on your car, you have fuel, you have air, you have gas. They're all going in the engine to make power. So that's what the combustion uses. Now, I'm not gonna be needing those 3 things. I'm only gonna be having air through here. I'm not going to be having the fuel system on, and I'm not going to be having the spark on. So those are not going to be installed / working. So if you guys can see right here, I don't have each of these spark plugs installed, which means that the engine is going to be making no compression when I turn the engine on. So with the crankshaft and camshaft spinning, all the valves are going to be moving as they should, but I won't be able to build compression because there's no spark plugs. So essentially all of that air and the displacement that the pistons are going up and down is all going to be escaped into the atmosphere because there's nothing that's capping it off. So not only that, I'm also going to have to go inside the car, and in the passenger side kick panel area, there's going to be a fuel pump fuse that I'm going to need to pull so the fuel system doesn't bring fuel into the engine. So once I do both of those things, I'll be able to turn the engine on and see if everything's working. Now at that point, you're going to be making the engine run with very little load, but everything should be operational. So everything should be turning, all the mechanical bits of the engine should be spinning. What that's essentially doing is allowing the oil system to pump and push fluid through the entire engine before we put load on all the bearings. So the crankshaft, the connecting rod, and every other bearing that's found in the engine, that can all be lubricated before we turn it on. So right now there's 4 quarts of engine oil in here. This engine requires 4.2 liters, so a little bit more than 4.2 quarts. So I'm just gonna put a little bit more in, check the engine oil level, and then we'll be able to start her up. Now with the engine all topped up with engine oil, we can move down into the passenger footwell area and see fuse number 43. It's a yellow 20 amp fuse. So I'm gonna use some needle nose pliers and extract it so that the fuel pump doesn't turn on and feed the engine with fuel once we do the initial startup. So we're gonna keep this, set this aside, because we're gonna eventually need to put that back in once we cycle engine oil through the engine. So with the engine in this state, we have no fuel, we have no spark, we have engine oil, we have coolant, and we're pretty much ready to fire this thing up. Now what I'm essentially gonna be trying to do is dry starting the engine with no compression. So I have no spark plugs inside of here. I shouldn't be having any combustion pressures being made inside each one of the combustion chambers. I'm trying to make it so that the engine can start or rotate as easily as possible so that all the engine oil that's found in the bottom of the engine can circulate through the engine as easily as possible. This is gonna make it so that that initial startup is gonna go really nice and easy. After I do that 3 times, I'm gonna be able to go ahead, put the spark plugs in, put the fuel pump fuse back in, prime the fuel system, and then start her up.
You want to remove the tape?
Yeah. Was it pulling it in?
Yep. That's why I was like, let's get rid of this.
That didn't sound good.
Nope.
Okay, so after that terrible noise you guys just heard, unfortunately we had an issue with the engine. So we took the valve cover off, we took all the timing chain components on the timing side of the engine, we took those out, and we found out that the bolt that was connecting up the exhaust sprocket up to the exhaust camshaft snapped clean off. And even though I used the proper torque to spec procedure, as per the manufacturer, it broke. And I still have the other part of it still hooked up inside the camshaft. So I need to drill it, easy out it, and then hopefully I can get all this back together and running. I'm gonna be heading out to the BMW store, or the BMW dealership, to go pick up those 2 last parts. The sprocket that was on the crankshaft that is in control of the timing, it's like a 20 tooth cog. That thing is completely stripped. So I have another one here. I'm going to use that, but again, another hiccup. Woo! Welcome to engine building. But this is basically how far we are now. And we're hopefully gonna be able to get this back together soon. Keegan's here to help me. We've got everything on the wheel well area here off. The serpentine belt is off. The bolt and everything in here is removed. So I still have a lot of work ahead of me, but knock on wood, we'll be able to get this thing up and running ASAP. We're almost there. We have the fuel in the system. We have the engine oil that we need. So I'm gonna drop the oil pan too, just to make sure there's no metal chunks or shavings inside the pan, and then we'll go from there. So as you guys can see, this is the intake camshaft, and there is no bolt that's inside the threads. So this is going to be fine, but the exhaust one isn't exactly in the same state. So you can see that there's like the little end of the bolt that's still in there. I'm gonna have to remove that and extract it if I wanna reuse this camshaft. So we have exhaust side, intake side, sprockets in there. Thankfully the sprockets aren't damaged. That was good. Valve cover was removed. We have the valve cover bolts in there, and all this needs to go back on once we get those 2 bolts in. So I'm gonna be replacing the torque to yield bolt here, along with the torque to yield bolt here, time everything up, and hopefully get this thing running. I was just saying to Keegan that this could have been a lot worse. Thankfully, I hope nothing else is wrong in the cylinder head. If the valves kiss the pistons, I might have to take the cylinder head off, but knock on wood, I don't have that issue. I stuck the camera, my little endoscope, right here. I stuck this inside each of the combustion chambers and looked at the pistons. There is no scratching or dents or whatever inside of that. So knock on wood, everything should be running fine after I get these parts in. But when I get those parts, I'll make a video for you guys and get this thing running ASAP. Yeah. Thank you guys for being patient. I really wish this didn't happen, but it is what it is. Anyways, guys, if you have any further questions, comment section's down there. You guys know what to do. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.